Just imagine me as a large little lamb, um, which I use for my avatar. Okay, well, we've got several of us. So this is actually going to be, well, I'll start out with, so if you're here for information modeling and data modeling, you are in the right place. This is what we're going to be talking about, and this is mainly a little live demo. We're gonna model something, and you are going to help me do it. So my name is Sharon Crossa. I work as a web consultant and Drupal trainer at two places. I work part-time at Stanford University. Different departments hire me and to work on their projects, and then I teach them how to do stuff, and they get rid of me, and I go on to the next department. And I also do something similar at SK Plus for non-Stanford work. You'll see my contact info there. I'll just point out that my SK Plus website is still Drupal 6, and it's embarrassing, but I have not had time to do anything about it. Stanford one does actually periodically get updated for my Stanford work. Feel free to contact me with questions, or if you decide, hey, I really like how she did that information modeling and data modeling, you know, give me a call. Okay, so that's who I am. So what we're going to be doing, I'm going to start out with a couple of definitions. So information architecture is something that lots of people use, and they often mean something different by it. How I'm using the term is it's about organizing and presenting your information to convey what you intend to convey to your visitors. So it's not just the information itself, but it's how it's presented. And it's also considering not just your decisions about how to present it, but what that's actually saying to the visitor. When the visitor comes, what do they see and interpret? And conclusions do they draw without even realizing it from how you presented it? However, we're not going to talk about that aspect very much. We're going to really concentrate on the information. There's the basic sort of thing as with a building architect. Before you can start designing something, you need to know, well, what sort of things do you need in this building? What's it for overall? Is this a school? Is this a house? Is this a hospital? What sort of rooms do we need? Do we need, bathrooms and classrooms, or bedrooms, or, what is it that we need, that we're building here? So then information modeling is part of our information architecture, and it's a way of looking at not just what is the general information that we need. We need information about staff, but what particular details do we need to include in that information about staff? There's a lot of things we could include about staff. Staff are people, so they have birthdays. Do we care about birthdays on our website? Well, no, we don't. That's not information we want to have. But we do need their email and maybe their office location. Do we need their home address? Probably not. So this is about what are the details we care about, as opposed to what all the entire universe of possible information. And we're also interested in how these things relate to each other. So we have a staff member, they might belong to a room, but maybe it's a shared room. So there's another person that can belong to that same location. So we're looking at, modeling how what information is that we're interested in, and how it relates to each other. And then data modeling takes that information model and specifies how to implement it in a particular technical instance. So if we're making a Drupal website, how do we take that information model and turn it into the data model how we're going to build it in Drupal? You can do the same with WordPress, with Dreamweaver, however you're going to do it. You can all have the same information model, but you can have multiple different data models that are to implement that information. So the system that we're going to model here. We're going to do a conference. website. So the tool that I'm going to be using here is, sorry, Sharon, wrong room. I can help moderate. Sorry, just reading. I've just noticed something that is someone sent me a message here. So let me just reply to them because they're saying they can help me moderate. The tool that we're using is called draw.io, and it's one of these things that can be used for all sorts of chart making and things. But one of the nice things about it is it has a little package that's for entity relationships. This is over here on the lower left is generally what they give you. And what I use is something called crowsfoot notation for doing my entity, relations and modeling. And it's basically a bunch of boxes. I've created this box shape because I find it useful with these sort of areas and fields. And then I draw lines between them that have, let me know if this is big enough for you to see on your screens. These bunch of these lines, and they have little notations on the end, which look like circles and chicken scratches, and and basically what they're saying is, like this first one on the top line is saying going from either 1 or 0. The relationship is 1 or 0 of going to 1 or 0 of another thing. The next hash thing is 1 or 0 to 1 and only 1, or 1 and only 1 to 1 and only 1. And their little actual 3-part thing is saying going to is like this first one on the second line is 0 or 1 going to 0 to many. So it's just sort of the kinds of relationships you have between things. And when I'm doing getting down to the details of my information model, I will use these different lines with these different endings to indicate what the relationship is between various things. As we do things, we're mainly just going to do my generic line over here, this one on the upper right, just to say if there's a relationship, and I'll get to the details yet, and I haven't really said what it is. So I'm just going to start. I'm going to take our friend thing here, and I'm going to copy it, which should do something. And then I'm going to scroll over somewhere, and we're going to start building. All right. So the first thing is we have a conference. Paste. Did it work? No, it did not. Live coding. It's fun. Well, the nice thing is I can grab a new one. So I'll grab this thing, which I'm going to call our conference. So the first thing is in a conference, we have, apparently I can't spell conference. So sorry about that, conference. So my first question, and this is where people can have somebody pipe up and say, what are some information that we might have about our conference?
Speakers?
Yeah.
Location?
Location. Excellent. And we'll put, what else might we have?
Time.
Number of attendees.
I'm sorry, what was the next one?
Limit on number of attendees.
Okay, which also makes me think of something. First, we might want to have some attendees.
What the conference is about.
We might have a topic. Okay, we might have, I'm just going to make a bunch of these things, make our lives easier. Okay, topic. Attendees, limit on attendees. All right, see. Let's call that a fire max limit. Just for fun. Okay. What else happens at a conference that we might want to have information about on our website?
People that are going to attend.
Okay, we got that. That was attendees. How about
Oh, you're right.
sessions?
and
Oh,
sessions.
speakers. Actually, that's good. And speakers would have sessions. Excellent. Okay, so we've got a bunch of things here. So, you know, some of these things. All right, if I go a little bit smaller, can you guys still see this? We have a, I don't know how people raise hands or I can see anything. Somebody speak up if you can't still see this. And if I don't hear anything, I'm going to assume it's good. So we talked about attendees, but we might want to know some specific things about attendees. And we don't really want that, you know, so we can break this out. Oops, wrong one. Pardon me while I remember how to do this. Yes, okay. It's supposed to give me a little help. There it is. Click to connect and clone. Okay. Control click to clone, shift click to connect. It's supposed to do something useful. Oh, I know why. Okay, I have to grab the whole thing. There we go. All right, so this is obviously not the conference, but this is an attendee. We're just gonna select all these guys and get rid of them. Put some new ones in. All right, so what do we want to know about our attendees?
First name, last name.
Okay, let me give me myself some. All right, so we want to know first name. We want to know last name.
Maybe their,
pardon?
Sorry. Oh, maybe their organization?
Oh, their organization. Okay, that's good. Okay, anything else we want to know about our attendees?
Title.
Oh, title. Because we're like, you know, prestige contests like that. All right. So we got some things we want to know about an attendee. Now this thing, of course, this is not doing what I told it to do. All right, I got to open up the side thing here. So I had told it that I wanted nothing on the ends of the lines, but no, it does not do that for me. Let me save that as a default style. Okay, so this is where, you know, this thing about the little arrows I was talking, the ends of the arrows. So this one, for a given conference, of course, we can have multiple attendees. So I want to say that at the far end of that, I wanted to have that little, we're going to say it has to have one or more attendees. We expect there to be some. And I'm actually, see, where do I put this to? There. I think I've actually connected this now to the attendee box. So there can be one. Obviously, each attendee, we only have one conference, so you know, I could put the one and only one at the end of that. We aren't going to do this for each of the boxes we make necessarily, but this is kind of the idea. So I've now said not just that there's this information and some details here. I've said this is the relationship between my thing, my conference, and my attendee. Now, if we have, so the topic is something there's just going to be one of, so, you know, that can just stay under conference. Similarly with time and location of the conference in the max fire limit. But speakers, that'd be another thing that we're going to want more information. So what did it tell me? Shift, click, drag to connect, click, control, drag to clone. Oh, that just randomly draws a thing. Okay, let's try this again. So I'm going to shift click. I'm going to have a thing that's just not going to cooperate. That did not work at all. What did I do before? Control click, click on, shift click to connect. click to connect and close. Oh, so it's the easiest thing that I'm not remembering. That's good. Click and code. Okay, so now we have, I'm going to just move this down here. We'll scroll up a bit. I'll bring conference down so we can see it. Okay, so this thing is, what did I just say this was? Speakers.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we have speakers. Now, I have, of course, it's just doing whatever the last thing I did was. That's good. So we have speakers. I'll get rid of this information. I should have cloned the thing above. Except for attendees does not really go with it. All right, so we have speakers. So, and we can have, the relationship is actually pretty much the same. Each speaker is going to be going to this one conference. We don't care about all the other conferences they might go to in their life. We only care about this one. And of course, the conference can have one or more speakers. So similar to up here, we also have similar sorts of things we probably want to know about them. I can get a guess. First name. Last name. We'll just assume the rest of that kind of personal stuff. But there's something special about speakers that we're going to want to know that we don't want to know about attendees, which would be the sessions. Somebody said speakers. Just checking up on the. So we have sessions that is something we're going to want to know about speakers, which again was something that we also had over here. And this is one of the places where we kind of go, what's the relationship between speakers and conference and sessions? Because it's not really, I mean, you know, obviously there is a relationship between the speakers and the conference, but let's make sessions and then think a little bit about, yay, it worked, about this relationship. Or actually, we're going to say sessions, because each of these things is like a single instance. I mean, we're saying this is going to be, there's going to be a bunch of these different things. So there's going to be a speaker, a bunch of them, a session, a bunch of them, an attendee, a bunch of them. We'll get rid of all these things. This is where I begin to really regret putting so many things down for what there is in a conference, since that's the thing I'm cloning. So, and I'm going to get rid of this. Well, actually, no, I'm not. The sessions, a conference has sessions, so we're going to sort of keep that relationship. But then we have a relationship between the session and the speaker. And I want this to shift click to connect. We want the session to go to the speaker. Oh, we'll put the speaker there. So we have a speaker, or speakers, as the case may be. So we have this to say we have a relationship that each session has one or more speakers. Now, the relationship here, each speaker could actually have one or more sessions. So we want to change that relationship going this other direction, that the speaker could have more than one session. Is this making sense to, oh, sorry about that. Is this making sense to people?
It makes sense to me.
All right, that's one person. Yay.
Hello?
I mean,
Hi, it makes sense. I do have a question, but you're probably going to cover it soon, and I didn't want to derail, but I am listening.
Okay. So if we don't get to it, make sure. Are we the last session?
Yes, we are.
Okay. All right. So we have a speaker, the session. What other things besides speaker might we want to know about the session?
How long the sessions are going to be?
Yeah. So, so more generally, we want to know the time, the beginning and the end of the session. What else do we want to know about the session?
Topic?
That would be good. All right, the topic.
The
Anything in-
level.
oh, the level.
The
Yeah,
level.
that's a good one.
Yeah.
What else? I have no idea who's saying any of these things, so
The people that would be attending.
but that's great.
I'm sorry, the people that would be attending, is it too advanced? Is it pre-advanced? Maybe what the requirements for each session are.
Yeah, okay, so that'd be sort of in with level requirements. This thing makes it very hard to get to the end of something. Or called prereqs, that's what it is. Prerequisite. I may or may not have spelled correctly. Oops, no returning. What else might we want to know about a session? Like the room would be.
If it repeats.
If it repeats.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Ah, which means actually the time and the location could be something where there's actually more than one of them. So if our sessions, if the same session is held multiple times, we could actually have a thing that would be the sort of I don't know, what would we call that?
Like recurring?
Session occurrence.
Oh.
Yeah, session occurrence. That's a good one. Let's do that. So I'm gonna do that. Session occurrence. So here, session. And so the session occurrence is actually, it's the time and the location for that particular occurrence. So we don't actually have time and room here. We have it in the occurrence. So we need to have a little thing here saying occurrence, which will be specified here. So this one, we connect that to, did I connect it to it? Let's find out. I am doing, I don't know what. My little arrows are not turning into the right kind of arrows where I expect them to be little arrows. All right, and we'll get rid of these extra occurrences that we didn't actually intend to do. So each session would have one or more occurrences, but an occurrence would only have one session. So we're gonna, it's gonna help us to think about these things.
What about the sessions being recorded?
Oh, actually, that's a good one. Is it good?
Then you wouldn't need occurrence, because then you could just go back and replay it if you want, right? Or
well, I mean, depending on how you're organizing this conference, if it's going to be, I mean, if say, we've got like 3,000 people and they're all physically present, we might actually want to have the same session multiple times. Not necessarily, but in any case, every session is going to have a room and a time. Even if it turns out that it's always the one as opposed to the many sessions occurrences.
wouldn't that be part of the pre-planning then, to know how many people are going to go, so you could get rooms and stuff before this happens?
Oh yeah, that would be part of the pre-planning. But what we're doing here is we're setting up the information that that we're going to have on the website. So let's actually say that the session occurrence, we've decided that there's only going to be one instance at any given time, but where's the one-to-one? But excuse me. But kind of connecting the time and the room together, we decided that someday in the future we might have multiple occurrences, and this website's being built to go onwards, which we may revisit at a different time. So we could have sort of either way. Now, the other thing that's interesting about that, though, is if we did have multiple occurrences, we wouldn't necessarily have the same speaker at each occurrence, in which case our relationship between session and speaker might actually be to session occurrence to speaker.
Would you then change the session name itself then to prevent any confusion or not?
Yeah, I might. I can't think of what the word would be. A better word would be, but that would be something that I might think about. Was the session on? I mean, like if this was not a conference, but like school, we might have a class and a section, and that would make it clear. But I don't really know what it would be for a session.
Well, styles, for instance, if some professor has one way of doing things and let's say you have another, then the styles are different. And then, it could get a little confusing to me. But that's just.
Yeah. And there's a lot of things that we can include, but one of the things we have to also do is decide what's going to make sense. What is it that we actually decide that we're going to care about? Let's see. So we could, it's one of the reasons why we might want to also think about session occurrence is because we have this thing, a room here, and we're going to actually have multiple rooms that, will be pointing to different sessions. We might have, for example, like where something is, you're going to click on it and then go and see the information about the room, like all the other things that are there. And that may be something that leads us to break out session occurrence. Because there's more information about a room that we're going to want to have, like what's its capacity. Capacity, that's the word. So like, for example, if we take the session occurrence, we're going to just go out from it. And I'm going to turn that back to the default. Can I turn it back to the default? Not really, because all of a sudden it's not showing me that. So if we have this as room, and one of the things about this is we're setting these things out, and we're going to change things as we decide, it's actually not how we really want to do it. That's not really how the information is, the relationships between the information that we're talking about. So the room, we would have the building and the room number. Room number, and we would have capacity. So how big is the room? Which is something we may or may not want to have on our website. Maybe we want it for the organizers going to make use of it too. But the room can have multiple session occurrences happening in it. So we would connect that. We would sort of have that sort of thing going on here.
Could I add one thing too?
Sure.
What about if people want to log in like we're doing with this session? Would that be added or not?
That would probably be something that would go, well, I'd probably go with the, that was good, Sharon. Okay. Last time I did this, it worked. Now it's doing this. I have no idea why. Click to connect and clone. Shift click to connect. Control click. All right, this is where I want the, why was it working before and not now? Okay, so this might be, the Zoom URL.
Perfect.
And excuse me. So a lot of these things are things that we could actually have session occurrence. If we do have this one-to-one relationship, we could actually have session occurrence be, all be within the session. That is something that would, let me close this up to give us a little more space. All right, I'm going to zoom out a little bit more to just so if we can see. This may be getting too tiny for you. You guys can let me know if that's the case, and when I'm actually typing things, I'll pull it up. At this level, we really just want to see mainly that top level thing. We've got our session. So we might end up deciding that we're going to fold session occurrence back into session because we are just going to have one for each of the things. And that may make sense. But the relationship between a session occurrence or session and the room is the room has a lot of different things going into it. But each session occurrence just has one room. Let's see, we've got sessions, we've got speakers, we've got rooms, we have attendees. We don't really want to match up, at least I feel on the website, we don't really want to match up the attendees with the sessions. Although we could if there was like an RSVP or you had to sort of sign up so that they didn't get too many people in the room. But we're going to decide, that's one of the things we're going to decide is we really don't want to do that. We don't care. Just like we don't care about people's birthdays because we're unfeeling and antisocial. So have we got all the things? We got rooms, sessions, speakers. I'm just thinking, should I go over and look at?
Oh, sure. I have
Yes.
a question.
Yes.
I'm wondering, to Jeff's point, bringing out if people do view the presentation later, I'm wondering, would we differentiate between something like views as opposed to actual attendees, or would that be going too far?
Well, that would be an interesting thing. The attendees, because we're thinking, remember, we're doing this as a website for a conference. So on a website for a conference, very common, like we did at Stanford WebCamp, you have a thing where if you're attending, you sign up and then you're listed as one of the attendees. And for something where people can go and look at it later, that's an interesting question. And it really comes down to the people, the stakeholders of this website, and do they want to register everybody who views it so they know who viewed it, which they may or may not want to do depending on things. Usually what there really would, most places probably are like for instance what Stanford might do is they might keep track of how many times a video gets viewed, and they might keep track of that piece of information. And in some ways, what we've got here with our session occurrence, what we're eventually going to have on the session occurrence, this is where I keep doing that same thing again because I don't learn. What are we going to call this? The video recording. I don't know. We'll just call it the video. So the video, which isn't going to show up until after, it won't get uploaded until after, is a thing that kind of goes with the session occurrence information. Is something that's not coming at the same time as the advanced information, and for that we might actually have a whole nother that'd be a whole nother thing in a sense, is because for each thing we have a video, and the video has other information that I did it again. I am really talented this way. I am so sorry. These things that you don't do, you just do without thinking, and then all of a sudden you're in like a presentation and you're like, oh no, how do I do this?
That could affect the attendance too, correct?
Yeah, I mean, if depending on what on how you're thinking of the attendance. So the video, there might be more sort of some metadata that there might be for this that you would be having. We're just going to ignore that line and what its relationship is. But yeah, so you're saying each sort of thing that we have, we start thinking about what's the information, where does it go, how does it relate to the other things, and yeah, so we've done the information bit. For the most part, we may make some changes at some point if we the session occurrence thing is one that we're sort of haven't quite figured out whether we're repeating various things. I think at this point I might be inclined to meld session occurrence and session in together as one thing, because I think, say like Stanford, we are only having one session, you know, occurrence per session. So that's something that it would actually make sense for these to actually be joined in together for Stanford conference. For another conference, it might be a different answer. And we're, you know, this site we're building is just for a little conference, say. The next stage of the data modeling is when we start saying, well, how are we going to do these things? How are we going to take this information? What's the structures that we're going to build for it? And what I tend to do, after saving carefully the original, this is what I think the information is, I then start going in here and start making some decisions about what's going to be, what's going to be a content type, what's going to be a taxonomy, what's going to be, I don't know, a paragraph type, what's going to be well, in 7 we had field collections, and I think in 8 they're moving more towards just using paragraphs for that. So starting to think about what sort of these things are, what sort of fields do I want to use for each of these things, and how do I want to handle them? So actually, let's connect.
What about appearance too?
Yeah, appearance does not really come into the data modeling and information modeling. That's sort of a whole nother side of things. It is something that you want to keep aware of, because you're going to be wanting to think about things like, well, for speakers, are we going to want to have, like, on one page we're going to want a list of speakers, and each speaker will have a page, and we'll link from the session to the speaker, and you kind of have some of these ideas of how you might be setting things up to work. Not so much exactly visually how they're going to be, but just some general ideas of, we're going to have lists, of you. We're going to have a page. So as we're modeling how we're going to do this in Drupal, we're thinking about, and how are we then going to be presenting it in Drupal? But not with the fine details of, like, what color anything is going to be. So for example, a speaker, I'd probably do that as a content type. And so I might just put that in right there. Very often when I am actually, doing this for real, in this place where I've said explanation, I'll explain what this is. Sometimes it's not terribly obvious. I mean, speaker's pretty clear. Some of them are not terribly clear what it is, unless you're a specialist in it. So it can be really helpful to have a little explanation there. And then I put in, what kind of field do I want to have for this? So this would be, a text field. And this would also, whoops, I don't want to do that. Stop it. And this would be another text field, and this I would do by entity reference, and apparently I need to type entity reference shorter, entity ref, and so I can go through and make these sorts of, how am I going to do these things. One of the things that will often happen at this time is I may come up with places where, hey, I need to have a taxonomy. So for example, buildings, say there are like 4 different buildings in which the rooms are going to be. And when I was kind of doing room and building, I wasn't really kind of thinking about that, just about the information. But it turns out, I want to control in the data model what people can enter for a building, because there's only 4 buildings that it can be in. It can't be in any of the 75 other buildings on campus, and it can't be in, any building in the world. So
well, and thinking of, if I could say something too, and think of the attendee. Yeah. When you said different sessions, you might want to consider working with the people that want to go and say, well, if I want to see this person, and you've got another session with another person, we might want to stagger the time so that the people showing up to the conference can go to each session and do that. But if you put them all at the same time, then they're forced to choose which person I should see if you've got identical sessions.
Yeah, so you're saying there might be a thing where you want to have people be able to show what their schedules are, so that other people can
Right.
Is that,
Or stagger the sessions to where they can attend those different sessions at different times where they're not
so
overlapping.
that might be something that has more to do with the organization, but it is something that would be an advanced feature. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot you can do. I mean, you know, the possibilities are infinite, but what you have, one of the things, of course, when you're building a site, you're talking to your stakeholders and you're finding out what is it that they want. What are the things that they're trying to get out of this? What are the things that are essential, and what are the things that are, you know, nice to haves if it fits in the budget kind of thing. So the building would be the sort of thing where, you know, what I really only care about with the building is, you know, the name of it. I don't need to get too exciting about that. And so that I might decide would be a taxonomy. And I usually also, for myself, taxonomy, I actually will very often change the color of these headers to make it easier for me to see what's a content type and what's I've decided is going to be a taxonomy. And this is just a, you know, not a necessary thing, but a little habit. So usually what I do when I'm making these connections, if I'm going like this field is going to this thing, I try to make the link go from the field then to the sort of explanation thingy on the other side, and that sort of makes clear, you know, what's kind of going generally. So, you know, this I decide is a taxonomy. So this is one of these things that as you go through and start actually signing some technical stuff to this, what is the data? How, you know, how is this really going to, you know, how am I going to implement this information? You will find that sometimes that you will make some decisions about, okay, you know, I didn't realize that I needed to have this extra bit, or actually this is a lot of work doing it as two separate things, and I need to merge my session and my session occurrence into, because I don't really need to have a whole nother entity. Usually anything that turns out to be a thing that has, you know, usually a thing, you know, thing being this box, it's the highly technical term, thing, is some kind of entity in Drupal terms. You know, it's a content type or a taxonomy or a, I can't think of any of the other kinds of entities, but they exist. Sometimes say that everybody's going to have is going to have you know, the attendees are all going to register on the website. In some ways, the attendees are actually users. And so that would be, you know, taking advantage of that structure. Then we get to the interesting thing about the speakers. Well, the speakers are kind of actually a subset of the users. So we kind of have, is the attendee a speaker? And, you know, our connection we might have another connection that goes from, let's see, how did it tell me I could do a link? Click to connect and clone. Shift click to connect. Okay, so if I go from here to, I go to that one. Well, that doesn't make any sense, but anyway. So connecting these two things, because the speakers are also attendees. And so the speaker might, you know, is still a content type, but it's being linked to the user. Let's see, speaker, question mark? Are they a speaker is kind of what that's saying. Another time, I won't kind of do this because we're actually slightly over time already. Another complication that we might have come in is, well, we have speakers and then we also have moderators, for example. We've had those for all of our sessions here. And Claire has been doing that for me here. So we might actually have, instead of having that be, you know, are they a speaker? It could be what's their role. And that can, and it's, So that's, or that might actually go under here. So, but this is sort of we're kind of being a little skimpy on the data modeling side of this, but I make use of this information that I've sort of, I'm going to zoom out so you can see the little bit more of the complexity of all our connections here. Is taking this, kind of now I've got a clear idea of what is the information, how do I want to organize it, and then I can start thinking, all right, how do I want to implement that? And this implementation might be very different. I mean, I don't work really with WordPress, so I don't know how they would be thinking in terms of implementation. It might be quite different. Somebody said they were going to have a question. Was it ever asked or answered? I don't remember who it was who said they had a question, but they didn't want to.
Oh, that was me. Yeah.
Was it answered?
Well, I think so. I'm still, basically, like you said, I had been thinking to myself that speakers would also be attendees. So
yes.
Connected.
Yes. So yeah. Yes. So it's kind of like the attendees would also be speakers. And when you start, this is sometimes, I mean, you may have, got it, you thought of it in advance. Sometimes with your information, you will discover that you forgot about something. Like, oh wait, speakers are also attendees, and I'm making attendees users, so the speakers also need to have this, to be users. And how are we going to deal with that? Because we could actually make the speakers be, the speaker information. Like for instance, we have some repetition here. Because they're also users, we would have their first name and their last name. We would have that from their attendee thing. We wouldn't have to repeat that as with organization and title. So the speaker thing here, this would be an entity reference field to, if they're a speaker, I guess, or I don't know. Yes.
That makes sense.
Something. There'd be something here. We don't know what I'd call that field but it's something to take them off to the speaker with the special information that speakers will have.
Gotcha.
So
that makes sense.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So where would you put the information about the speaker? So the first thing I do when I go to a conference is I see the speaker, and then let's say I don't know anything about him. I want to read a little bit about him. Where would that fit into this?
Well, that is a question that could be done a couple of different ways. One is which, if we're having all of the attendees give some information, we could put that in the attendee, a sort of a bio, and that would be used for the speaker bio. If we were only going to let speakers tell the world about themselves, then we might put the bio just in the speaker thing. So it would sort of depend on what we decided. It could be done either way. For example, the Stanford camp, what they did is, I mean, I don't actually know how they built this thing. So this information model may not actually apply to, or especially the data model may not apply at all to what they've done. But the bio may be in the attendee. Now, one of the things, I didn't really clarify this very much, but one of the things is when you're, kind of going through and deciding what are the relationships between things, very often if what you find is you decide there is a one-to-one relationship, that is often a sign that you should, like this one that isn't actually doing it very nicely at all. Come on. Sometimes the pointy stuff doesn't point very well. Okay, session is supposed to be there, and it's apparently too far over, and it just can't handle life. But anyway, the session occurrence I think we had is a one-to-one, ended up being a one-to-one relationship. Let me just drag this over here. Oh yeah, it's a one-to-one relationship. Okay, that's just being weird. Okay, I just don't get that at all. I have no idea why it is being quite so weird. But that's often an indication that you don't really need a separate thing for it. It can just be fields within the thing that it was connected to. So if we only have one session, one occurrence of each session, it would actually make sense to have these things all be in session. And similarly with our attendee and speaker, if we decide that we really want to have all the same information about an attendee as about a speaker, and that there really isn't anything to put in speaker other than making these two connections, we may decide that the connection should be direct. Now, you may come up with, well, what about if we want to know, we want to have the attendees who are not speakers sign up for the classes? How can we have, if there's just a relationship directly between the attendee and the session, how do we, just differentiate? And there, the way we would do that, let me just unhook these for a second. And so we're going to take that away and just say it's not going to be there. But let's say, and this actually I think is kind of showing that maybe the thinking of putting the speaker field up in the attendee is not the way to do it. Maybe what it is for the session, and we're pretending that we've decided this is a single session, so it's going to have all the same stuff as session occurrence. And we had the speakers, and we would just link from speakers. I'm just going to grab, I'm going to grab a multiple on multiple. Somewhere, many to many, many to many. So I'm just going to say that the speakers, there can be many speakers, there can be more than one speaker going to, and then over in the session, the other thing we'd put here is attendees. And then I would have a similar relationship where I would say that the attendees, because in the way we do things in Drupal, this would be an entity reference, and this would be an entity reference, but they'd be two different fields. And that would probably be a better way of dealing with that if we're not having anything that's only gathered for speakers. And it would make actually doing a lot of the building of the structure a bit more straightforward, because we wouldn't have to be going through two layers. Like we wouldn't have to have in our views, we wouldn't have to have sort of reference, going through, referencing this to get to the thing that's connected to that. We could just go get the thing directly, because it would all be in one place. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Sharon, I think Rachel has a question.
Rachel, what is your question?
Hey, I know we're almost out of time here. I like this conceptually, especially since it's how I process information. I'm trying to connect this with that and have it make sense. Can you sum up what the use case is for it? I apologize if you said that right at the beginning.
No, I did not necessarily put it in so many words. The use case of this is what I would say basically is, if you're going to build a website, this is one of the very first things you should do. And now I've done it using Draw.io and fancy little stuff like this. You can actually do this on a whiteboard. You can do this with 3x5 cards. You can do this with sticky notes. The first time I gave this, I actually planned to do it on a whiteboard. But I then discovered that it was being recorded and zoomed for people who couldn't actually physically attend. And I thought, well, that'd be really horrible for them, because they wouldn't be able to see my whiteboard. And I couldn't figure out a way to whiteboard on my computer that actually worked. So we ended up doing this, which does happen to be how I do it when I'm doing it professionally. But that's just because I like to have when I'm making the sort of the model of record. when I'm actually talking with my clients about their site with the stakeholders, I'm drawing on a whiteboard. But I said, you know, you can do it 3x5 cards, you can do it on a piece of paper, you can do it with sticky notes. The basic idea is you want to have something where you can take, you know, here's a thing, you know, name the thing, attendee. You want to be able to write some bits of information that go with that attendee, name, organization, title, whatever. You want to have another thing, so another 3x5 card, another sticky note, another square on the whiteboard. And it doesn't have to be super formal. I mean, I've developed this because, you know, I have, you know, I do it a lot, and my handwriting is terrible. So this makes my life easier, but I don't have to do it this way. And it's really about you're wanting to think about what you have. And it really is just starting with that, you know, start with the first sticky note. What is it? It is a staff member. This is staff, you know, what information do I, you know, write the fields underneath, first name, last name, you know, whatever you think about it. And then, you know, as you go through your list and you start thinking, oh, like for instance, say faculty member. So we all, you know, for those of us doing academic sites, you got faculty members and they have degrees, and very often they want those displayed.
Right.
Or else the department chair wants them displayed regardless of what the actual faculty members want, because, you know, prestige. So, and then you go, okay, their degree, but then you go, oh, wait, this guy's got like 3 degrees. You know, he's got a you know, an MD and a PhD, and they're both relevant. So we have to have more than one. So then you're like, okay, this is no longer just a little field on my faculty member. This is now a separate thing. So, all right, I'll break it out to a separate thing. You know, as you see with these, we still lead our, like, you know, a session has got speakers, you know, but speakers have more details that are just, you know, about the speakers. We link it off to our other thing. And you know, play around with these, you know, pieces of paper, sort them around, move them around, you know, and that's really just kind of, it's trying to get you sort of think of your data in you know, your information, what you're going to put on the web in terms of structured information that you're going to want to be able to do. It's really helpful, especially if you want to have the content editor's experience being one of enter it once, display it all over the place. Instead of having to go, okay, I've updated this guy's phone number here, and now I have to remember it's over on this other page too.
Gotcha.
You know, if you're using the structured data, which Drupal is especially good at, you make life a lot easier. Now, sometimes you have web pages, and we haven't really dealt with this here, where there's some information, like for example, if we go back to our conference, we have stuff like the location, you know, the general, like, what did I just do? The location, the time, the sort of general description, things like this of the conference, you know, that information we might not have separate fields for, because, you know, it may just be, you know, this is in a descriptive blob of text, or we might have them in separate fields. I don't know, but a lot of times you're going to have things that are just like, you know, about, and we want to have some history of this, where you have what you really, the information that you want is really a blob of text that could have anything in it, and we're not going to try to take information out of that blob of text and do something else with it. It's just going to live in that places where it lives as a blob. And so sometimes you have, you know, kind of like a static page, and you know, various sort of static pages that aren't going to have details in it. And when I'm doing these models, I very often will make, did I just put things somewhere? Yes, I did. I will very often make a thing like, you know, this might be, I'll just call it static page. My idea is this is just for there's going to be some pages where there's not like super exciting information, that's mainly just some expository text. So what pages, you know, I might list what they are. Now here it's usually fields. This is where I might, down this bottom thing that we haven't used, if it was a taxonomy term, I might put example taxonomy terms down in this bottom place. But for like my static page thing, I'd put what the pages are. So like, say we want to have a history page for that's just a page telling about the history of this site. There's nothing very exciting about that. And this is usually this sort of thing that I'm calling static page here. Very often this is there's like Drupal comes with a sort of a default basic page, or if you're using Stanford sites, you have Stanford page. And, they're sort of designed to just sort of be a generic page with that's mainly about a piece of, some expository text that's there. So I also model these, so I know, because sometimes I'll do this and then I'll realize, oh no, like I'll say history, and the department I'm working will say, oh, history's great. Actually, we could have a timeline with events. And then I'm like, okay, well now our timeline with events might actually turn out to be a thing where each timeline event is, a separate entry. And it gets organized automatically through magic.
So would you say that this is mainly about, or largely about, site hierarchy then?
It's really intertwined with site hierarchy. I mean, do you mean like this, meaning like the static page, or do you mean like this overall everything we're doing?
Overall, everything.
Overall, everything, it is intimately connected to site hierarchy. Because the information that you have is going to be very influential about how you decide to do things, but it's not the same as the hierarchy. Because, for instance, if we take our idea of user here, and we're over, so if anybody needs to go, please do. I'm happy to stay longer and talk more and answer questions. You could think about it as you've now all come up around the little podium like you do to the speaker afterwards and are asking questions. We are in that section of the thing. So if you want to go, please don't feel like you want, and apparently this is still being recorded, so you can come back and watch it later if you want. But if you have questions, please stay, I will answer them. Within reason. It gets too late, towards midnight, I'm gone. So where were we? Oh, attendee. Okay, so attendee, this is about information that we're gathering. First name, last name, organization title. If they're, we're not actually taking this field out because we decided it was going the other direction. We have information. This is information that we're showing. We might have a page where we have a view that's listing the attendees. So the site hierarchy is sort of navigation that someone is visiting. All right, there's a page that has a list of attendees, but there's also a page that has a list of session speakers. And there's also, for each session, a page, and it lists the speakers for that session. And this attendee information is showing up all those places. It's not just, so one of the things with a lot of modern web development tools, and specifically with, especially with Drupal, you don't really want to be thinking of a website as a bunch of pages. And so you have a bunch of pages and you have some navigation to these pages. And that is part of it, but what's in those pages is information. And the organization, the relationships and structure of that information is not a one-to-one correspondence, or even necessarily a vague at all correspondence to that, the information to that navigation and presentation is not, is not really one-to-one if you have if you have more than, 3 pages with some expository text on it.
So I think
you have something like this. Go ahead.
No, I just like suddenly realized, if I'm right, what they're trying to do here is do with data what CSS did with style, and make it so you're not changing on every page, having to re-enter.
Yes.
Can I interrupt for 1 sec?
Yes.
Sorry, can I interrupt 1 sec? I actually have to sign off.
Okay.
But I'm going to leave this window open. You guys can keep going if you want.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for stepping in.
Sure.
It's greatly appreciated. Okay. So, yeah, it's this is the, I mean, in a sense, this idea of having structured information and then using it in multiple places, like, which Drupal will say is really good at. Yes, it is very much like the idea of CSS. Instead of having to put all that visual stuff every time separately, the idea is we're going to put it all here, and we're going to pull it out when we need it, and we're going to ignore it when we don't.
Okay, got it.
And so it is very much a similar, you know, it's very much like that. And we're just doing that with the information that is you know, that we're going to have on this website. So it's kind of like a, yeah. And I mean, for people, for anybody, if anybody has experience with a relational database, working with relational databases, I will give you my quick shortcut for understanding how kind of a way to thinking about how, if you're building, say, a website in Drupal, you can think of it. And that is that you have you know, the information that you're putting into this website is basically like one big virtual relational database. So you're not building a bunch of pages, you're putting together a relational database, and then you're having queries to pull it out and show it in various places. And in Drupal, an entity, or such as a content type or user, is like a table definition. And it has fields, like in Drupal, they're called fields. And there's a module called views, which is what's used to kind of say, you know, given these conditions, you know, I want the things of this sort that match these criteria, and pull them out and display them. That's a module called views, and that's like your SQL query that goes in and pulls out the stuff from your database and shows it. And what was the other one was like a, you know, each individual instance of a content type, you know, a node, or, you know, each individual user, you know, is like a record in their respective table of information. And that can be really kind of helpful, you know, if you're trying to, if you happen to already have that. If you have no relational database experience whatsoever, or you don't understand them or anything like that, don't worry about it. You don't need to in order to deal with Drupal. It's just that if you already have that information, that background, this can be like a quick in to how to kind of think about it. And I'll also say, though, that the way you're thinking about information, that we're thinking about information here when we're modeling the information, is not going to be exactly how the databases end up under the hood that Drupal is going to do for you. What we're doing here is kind of, we're at sort of the abstracted level above, where we're just kind of thinking about the information, and we're going to let Drupal do all the nasty work of, you know, making sure we have our unique keys and, you know, whatever, you know, things you have to do when you're actually building, you know, the actual database itself by hand from scratch. Drupal does a lot of the work for us. So we just get to think about information and just simple relationships and just trust that will all work out under the hood, which it does actually. So does that make anything any clearer, or have I just stirred up the mud?
It's clear for me.
Now this thing that I have just built with you, I was, and also my handy little libraries, those things over on the left, I'm pointing to them, but you can't see me do that. I was going to upload them to the session, but apparently it won't let me put things with these file extensions. So I'm going to have to find someplace else to put them, but then I'll put a link. So you'll actually be able to download this file. The Draw.io is free, and the application I use, Draw.io, is free, open source. So you will be able to open these things and read them. You can actually do it all on the web. I happen to have downloaded their app, but I think their app is actually just pulling the web thing down. So does that? Anybody have any other questions? Follow-up questions? Any violent disagreements?
I have a quick question, Sharon.
Sure, James.
How are you seeing this integrate with structured data for schema and schema.org stuff? Or haven't thought about that?
I haven't thought a lot about it specifically, but it is the sort of thing that it's really super related. I think if someone were to sit down and kind of think, this might actually be, I think there would be parallels, and it's this is represented differently, and what happens when you actually build it into something. But it's it's basically structured data. And when we talk about the data model, and I was saying, for a given information model, you could actually have different data models depending on what you were to do it in, WordPress or Drupal or whatever. If you wanted to sort of make a fit it into a schema, in the way schema.org does it. That would be the data model the data model you would be doing for schema.org would be, it's a different data model, but it would be based on the same information model. It's just you'd be planning out of how you did it, what the sort of stuff that I do on sort of this left hand side of indicating. I mean, I'm not familiar enough with schema.org to remember what I would do it. I might have to come up with a different way of representing it to make it helpful. But it is the information part is pretty much the same idea. Where it is the whole idea is structuring the information wherever it makes sense to structure it. Which includes sometimes saying this is a blob of text. Like for instance, our little bio here, in some ways, that is a blob of text. It's just also, it is one blob of text associated with a particular thing. And that does happen. But yeah, it's structure all the data. It might life easier.
I had a power blip, oddly, just that second. So the Mac switched over to connecting to you through the phone line, but anyway, yeah, structure all the data, structured data schema, and
yep,
and the her question before about is this a little bit of what we're doing, or is this the whole site? I see this as part of. I remember when you presented this before, and really like this, and it's such a it's so intuitive and worth the time. And I brought it back to my team. But if schema, if structured data, all of it is on a march to natural language search and response and database, fingertip access to information on the web, then this is going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I mean, when data is structured, when information is structured, and it's not all bunches of blobs of text where you have to have intelligence, artificial or otherwise, in order to figure out what it is, and if it's artificial, it's going to make some horrible guesses. When it's structured, you just can do so much more with it, and having your data structured on a website, some of the advantages of this lets you have in your HTML markup. So how you have Drupal do the actual code that the browser loads, does wonderful things for your search engine optimization. It does wonderful. Right. It can do wonderful things for your accessibility. You start thinking about these things. And how making sure it has the right tagging to let people know what's going on,
right?
Because you have to be, that even with artificial intelligence, computers are dumb. Websites are dumber.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the web browser is dumb. It takes people to look at it and decide, okay, well, here's the speaker's name in this blob of text. But, if you want to have a list of speakers and you don't want to write it out every time you have a different place you want to have a list of speakers, structure that data and and tell Drupal, give me a list of the speakers. I want the speakers and their phone numbers so that I can have a page that only the people who are organizing can see, so they can get a hold of these speakers. You know, without having, you know, so it's basically, you know, if I just get all the speaker information from the speaker, I can then show it to different people, can see different parts, and I can show it, you know, 17 different places on my website, and I've only typed it in once. So I'd say, you know, this is the sort of thing I like to start, you know, working on this, thinking about the information with my clients before we start building. And some of it, you know, for certain types of things, you know, faculty member and faculty lists and things, you don't necessarily have to go over all the details with that with your clients, because this is something that's kind of a solved problem. You know what, you know, you can just kind of ask them, here's bits of information, which ones do you find important and want to have displayed? So you don't have to like painstakingly, you know, get all the bits of that out of them. But a lot of other things you do. I've been working on actually, I'll show you guys. It's really fun. So I have, where can I do it? Oh, sorry, there's like, I have a client that I've been working with for over a year now. That is, I hope there's nothing embarrassing. Oh, no, I don't want to show my tax year. Where, and this is actually an old version. We've done this. They're Stanford Nanofabrication Facility. And what they, I don't know if you guys knew this, but on Stanford, there is this facility where you can go and make like silicon wafers and other little, you know, things that make computers. Little tiny nano things of all sorts.
That's cool. I didn't know.
And it is so cool. And actually, let me get rid of, no, that doesn't help me. I want to get that. No, it's not going to get it closer. But this is an older, it's not even scrolling. Come on. All right, there. So this is I'll have to make it even smaller so you guys can see the scope of this. This is the information data model that we set up with them. And see if I can get this bigger, and let me get this 50%.
Can you include that in the session today? That's really cool.
I will take a look. I'm not sure that I can, because it belongs to them. But yeah, I might actually be able to include like a fuzzy one here, kind of saying, look, but you'll see we have a lot of things a lot of different fields that are all going to the same thing. So one of these things that they have, you know, they have equipment. Actually, you can go to their site, snf.stanford.edu. And they have, one of the big things that they have is they have lots of different pieces of equipment, and they need information about this so that their users can come and find the right piece of equipment to do whatever scientific-y thing they want to do. And some of this information they want to have is, for example, what materials can you use on this? What chemicals? What, you know, other things? And so we actually use Taxonomy for it. So we have, you know, a material taxonomy, and we have gases taxonomy, I think, and we have a chemicals taxonomy. Yeah, and, you know, sort of these various things so that we can, you know, tag up the equipment with all this stuff. And so when they now need to know about a material, though, they need to know it for several different things. Like they need to know it about sort of the substrate material, or the primary materials etched, or the, you know, different things. But the information is all coming from materials, because we want consistent use of what a material is, and we want them to be able to go somewhere and see all the things that use that material.
And you did this?
Yes.
You did this, Sharon? Wow, impressive.
Yeah, very impressive.
Yeah, I'm very proud of the SNF side. We're not done yet either. It's got more to do, but it's really, and this is one that's been very nice, because we've really worked collaboratively we have collaborated with them, and I've actually done a lot of training of them how to do the Drupal site. So they've been doing a lot of the building themselves, and I've just sort of been, I'm doing a lot of, I do some of it for them, but I do a lot of consulting, and it's just been really terrific because they've just really taken to it. They're scientists, so they kind of have this, oh look, structure. We like structure. But yeah, it can be, I did this as a historian, not with Drupal, and I didn't have this tool and stuff, but when I was doing my historical research, I structured my data. That's pretty much how I got what I, did the work for my research and my thesis, was I read the records and I structured the data.
Well, it's speaking of history, when you look at the history of studying the disease cholera and the breakthrough in realizing where it came from and how to treat it, it was data mapping that made the difference. So yeah, you start putting it down to do this, things will show up that you hadn't realized, and like happens in every engineering situation, make a model, put it in your hands, and you will get new insights into how it functions and what is going on that your imagination hadn't quite fathomed or put into words for you yet, but the model in your hands will.
Yeah.
So
it
it's
is
inevitable.
Yeah, and it's really it's really fun. I enjoy doing this with the structure thing, but I do, basically it's something that I would recommend for whether you do it as an exercise with your clients or part of it with your clients, or or if you sort of do it yourself after talking with them. A lot's going to depend on who your clients are and how they interact with the world, and but sort of as a person building a website, part of your responsibility is figuring out and extracting from the stakeholders what is the information, and not just what is information we want to have on a page, but what is the information, how does it relate, how can we get this information in a way that's going to make life easy for them to edit and maintain this, and it's going to make a nice experience for the people using it, because there's going to be this information found where they want, and it will be consistent.
Gosh, sorry.
Yes.
Oh, I hate to do this because it's already dragged on for such a long time. You just touched on a question that I had been mulling over, and it's very basic, but where does the information come from? Are you doing, scraping, or when you had that very detailed map just now, did the scientist sit down with you and run you through that whole list, or did you go just look?
Yeah, let me go back to that file. And I do open recent, except for that's not letting me see where it is. What we did with this did I just open the wrong one? I did. Sorry about that. What we did is I started talking with them, and we started on a piece of paper, and we moved to a whiteboard. Then I discovered, here we go. I discovered draw.io. Years ago, I had been using, I think, Concept Draw, but because I had gotten a really super deal at it one Macworld. So you can see here a bit more of what the actual details of these things are. And you'll see we have really exciting things that make no sense. Badger area. This is a legacy thing from a system that they have that controls who can use log into a piece of equipment, and deals with billing and stuff like that. And so we had to kind of relate it to the names that it has in this legacy system, but it was called Badger areas. So I sat down with them, and over many sessions, and we were starting to build some things as we were doing this, you know, sort of extracting from them what is this information, as I was teaching them how to build websites and things, and talking with them about, okay, you know, for this piece of equipment, what is the information that is needed for it? And for some of these things, they already had some tables of information because they had their old site and they had their old wiki, where there are some tables of information about equipment. And so we did some of that. We kind of you know, took those tables to figure out what these things were. For getting the data in, for the things where they already had tables, we were able to take those tables and import, you know, take them, turn them into Excel files and, you know, CSV files, and import them in using feeds in Drupal, which wasn't, you know, super straightforward because we had to get the data that was in these tables, which was not necessarily very regulated and consistent. And we had to come up with some things like, say for substrate size, you know, what exactly are the terms we're going to use? Because, like, you know, they in one place might have said, I don't know if these are the right levels of size, but for something that was a size thing, you know, is this 1 inch where you've got 1 and then like the double quote mark, or in another place you put 1 and then you wrote out inch, in another place you wrote 1 and then you have IN. So we had to do a lot of massaging to the existing tables before we could really import them. Although actually, I don't know how much was done in the process. My husband, Rob, who is still here, is actually one who did that importing. So for things where we had existing structured data, we were able to make use of that to import it. For things where we didn't already have some structured data somewhere, you know, we just had to enter it. Just as, you know, in the olden days, you would have to type it into the, you know, Dreamweaver page.
Is this the group in McCullough, Sharon?
These are in, oh gosh, I can't remember his name, Allen Building. So somebody might be in, I can't remember all the different buildings we have. This is SNF, so the Stanford Nanofabrication Facility. There's a related facility that is the Stanford.
Well, CIS is one of them.
Yeah, if you go to nanolabs.stanford.edu, there's like 3 or something listed. Okay. But you didn't know that there are like 3 different things where they're fabricating or characterizing, or it's amazing. But this is the SNF people.
SNF people, okay.
Yeah. That they're working with, and it's but yeah, so there's, you know, if you already have, like, for instance, if you already at Stanford, for like faculty information, it's actually really nice. For one, Stanford Sites has already got, at least for their Drupal 7, I don't know if they have it Drupal 8 yet, they have integration with Stanford profiles, so you can actually import structured data for all your faculty, and graduate students, I think, and students. Yes, basically anybody who has a Stanford profile, you can actually import that information, and Stanford has already kind of built things to make that easy for you, and they've built, you know, the person type that has all the fields. It's a bit messy, but that has a lot to do with where they're importing from. But you can kind of customize it to have the bits that you care about, being the ones. And at the same time, you can have additional fields on your person that, you know, aren't in Stanford profiles that you then add. So a lot of times you can import in, if you have pre-existing form structured data, you know, when you kind of do this data model and stuff, and you can kind of go, oh, do I have this? Or sometimes you know, I've got another site where we just, you know, we just we went to the web pages and just kind of copied the pages that had semi-structured data, and you know, kind of showing things in tables. And we sort of copied that. That was a sort of an emergency rescue we had to do for a site that had been compromised, and so that made it easier to put data in. But a lot of times it is, you know, for, like, you know, if you're doing a conference, all that data is new. So, you know, that's getting typed in by somebody. Now, one of the things with Drupal, as you know, find with the Stanford conference site, you know, they had attendees fill out their own information. And this is something you know, if that's appropriate for whatever website you're doing. Sometimes this is something that you can do. You can have users or staff members or somebody putting in the relevant information. The people who are responsible for the information, you can set things up so that they can safely enter it without messing up the rest of your site. And that's also a very nice thing. And structured data really helps them, because if you want from your faculty members, although I say that's a solved problem, especially at Stanford, but if you want from your faculty members, to give their degree in a certain way, I want to know what kind of degree it is and the university they got it from and the year they got it. You can set up your data, there's fields that they fill in these fields with specific things, as opposed to just a sort of an open blankness that they just sort of put it however they want. And if you want to, remember, they, really, want everybody to remember that they've got to put in their email address. If you have it as a separate field, you can ask for it specifically. If it's just remember to put it in your bio, they may or may not. So structured data does a lot of things to really help with getting the data in, whether it's because you can import it from an existing structured, thing that has it structured, or because when you're extracting it from people who are typing it in, you can help them to get it as consistent as you would like it to be.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, as I said, I'm very happy to hang around and answer more questions if there's more questions.
Just real quick, this isn't on the website. This is something you did, and it's only private to them, correct, Sharon?
I mean, this map, this sort of entity reference diagram thing. Yeah, this is not on the website. It's just what we did to build the website. To plan the website. It's really this is a planning tool. It also can turn into documentation. One of the things that I've really been trying to do with it, and I'm way behind for SNF, is when we do make decisions about the data structure, to reflect them in this document, so that we actually, because this is, as you can see, this is a very complicated site. We have a lot of, this is not your normal size site. It's a lot of content, a lot of complexity. By documenting how we did it, what's in a content type, what's its taxonomy, what the fields are, what the relationships are, it makes it a lot easier for someone coming in to then know, how, like if Rob and I won the lottery and went off to Scotland to live in retirement, SNF would be up a creek. Except for they can go hire somebody else who knows Drupal, and it's going to make that person's life a lot easier if they can look at this document and go, this is how it's built. I know what these things are. This is the relationship. They don't have to go reverse engineer by looking up, through the Drupal site itself, trying to reverse engineer what was done.
Kind of the Bible sheet.
Yeah, I mean, so it's a nice documentation when you start doing the data thing. And when we make a change to the data model, and we have made many changes to this data model, we say this is a year-old data. This copy of it is a year old from when I did it last time, and we have made a lot of changes. It is really nice to have it documented so that we can know what we did, and also things that on this one, like you see this little one down here, there's something that's in things that are in red are things that at that time weren't done yet. We've now, most of those I think we've done, but so, it's another thing we're saying, okay, this is part of the plan, but it hasn't been done yet. And that could also be useful. So it's an ongoing living document, but it is something that starts with the planning. It's something that usually really should kind of come, ideally before you start doing anything more than installing your basic Drupal, or whatever you're using. But it's never too late to start thinking about this. Even if you have an existing site, you can start thinking about, well, what is the data on this? What are the things what's there currently, how's it organized currently, and what would we like to have happening in the future. Because, websites are also living things that change over time. So as you can see, I really love this. I'm happy to talk about it for ages. I think Rachel has got a blue thing by her.
Oh, I was clapping.
Oh, okay. I'm like, I don't know. I just all of a sudden saw a blue thing that I hadn't noticed before. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will take clapping.